Hello, welcome to the African World. I'm Kwame Clement reporting. On the program today, we look at an innovative effort to provide adequate housing for the poor in South Africa. Also on the program today, we profile a former Peace Corps volunteer who served in Africa. But we begin by looking at the work of the Naill Melon Foundation to provide adequate housing for the poor in South Africa.
I've got keys for my house, free at last. I'm happy.
Nubuntu Onfegwena has a good reason to be happy. Before she got the keys to this house, she lived in one of these shanties.
It was one-room shack where I used to share with my mother, my two sisters, and my boyfriend, and my three kids.
Now, Nubuntu and her family have a comfortable and reasonably modern home.
This is my new home. I've got 2 bedrooms.
As Ubuntu Life Storage tells us, and as the slogan for the Naill Melon Foundation puts it, building more than houses, this is more than just building a physical structure. It's transforming people's lives, giving them a sense of dignity, self-worth, building for themselves and their children, a hope for the future. We're talking with Neliswa Mazwe, a resident of Umfolini Township. Neliswa, you're not only a beneficiary of this project, you're what is called a liaison officer, a liaison person. Tell us, what do you do?
When the beneficiary came to complain, I must follow up to talk with the foreman so that I can know what's wrong in their houses. That is my job. Most of the time they came to complain, they said my house is not built yet, so I have to explain why. We can't just demolish your shacks and build the house. It takes a process, so that I have to explain to them why we are not building the house now when we are going to build the house.
You have a family?
Yes. I have my husband, 3 kids, and me. We are 5.
And before you moved into your Naill Melon home, where did you live before?
I was living here in Fuleni, but there was no house. I was living in a shack for 15 years. So now when Naill Melon come, I have a house, 2 bedrooms, and dining room and a kitchen. There's a toilet inside,
A bath.
a bathroom.
And before that, compare that to the shack you live in.
Now it's very nice now, because it was hard for me before, because we don't have a water, we don't have nothing. We have to go. If we need water, we must go for a long time so that we can come with the water. We didn't even have a water here. So when Naill Melon come, our life is very nice.
Like thousands of other South Africans who once lived in shanties, Nubuntu got her new home free of charge, thanks to the Naill Melon Township Trust, founded by Naill Melon, an Irish entrepreneur and philanthropist. Since 2002, Melon has made providing adequate housing for desperately poor South Africans his life's work.
Evening. 4 or 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, I went on a holiday with my girlfriend to South Africa, and we were there for a couple of weeks, and I wanted to see what life was like inside one of the many townships that are visible on the motorways outside Johannesburg or Cape Town. And I was horrified, and to this day I'm still horrified, seeing the appalling conditions that people were living in. I went into a community outside Cape Town, and I asked to meet the community leaders, and they took me on a walk around, and I said to them, why don't we form a partnership together? I think I know how to build houses or apartments, and perhaps people in this community could become a team with me, and together in partnership we'll build some houses. I can think of no greater thing than for our charity to lead 5,000 Americans to come with us on a week of house building in South Africa.
There is urgent need for the work his trust is doing in South Africa. Since the end of apartheid, the government of South Africa has built over 2 million subsidized homes, moving millions of South African shack dwellers for the first time into decent homes. But the government is far from reaching its goal of providing adequate housing for all South Africans by the year 2010. More than 2 million South African families still live in these shanties. In townships across the Cape Town and Gauteng regions of South Africa, from Kilicha to Umfuleni and Freedom Park, the Trust is hard at work, erecting tens of thousands of homes on tight schedules.
Well, it's quite intensive. It's like we're actually running to a quite tight schedule, production schedule. We need to be quite proactive to try and get ahead of schedule because especially with the winter months here in South Africa, we lose quite a few days. Like especially just last month, we've lost at least, in the last 2 months, we've at least lost about 22 days due to rain that no building could actually continue. Then I do need to say to us, they've been very supportive in getting this whole project up and running because they've been waiting for quite a few years. That's why it's called Freedom Park, because they actually obtained the land on the same day Mandela was freed. Very same day they have been awarded the land to build the houses. So they call this particular place Freedom Park because it is in Tafelsig in Mitchell's Plain, but not just this little area where we're building the 493 units is called Freedom Park.
Freedom Park, perhaps, represents one of the Trust's most ambitious efforts. The goal is to quickly erect 500 homes for the people here who live under terrible conditions in virtual one-room shacks where the same space that serves as a bedroom, a kitchen, and a living room also serves as a bathroom.
So what I do is I throw a blanket on the floor and I put this board here. And this one I put on top of the table. I throw the water inside and then I stand in this big board. It's like the normal board. Then I'll board me and afterwards I'll have to remove all these buckets of water again and throw it outside.
Unlike the shanties that lack the basics of modern living, these new homes have virtually everything a family needs to live a comfortable life in South Africa, including running water and electricity. They even have a solar panel to provide hot water during the winter months.
And this house is a 45 square metre, semi-detached, 3-bedroom house with an open plan, living room and kitchen, and also a fully plumbed bathroom with a shower, toilet, hand basin.
Even with all of these features, each of these homes is built on a tight budget.
Well, a house like this is going to cost you approximately 55 to 60,000 rand, and that's probably about $7,000 to $8,000 depending on what today's exchange rate is. And that's amazing. I mean, if you think your viewers back home in the States, like that you can actually build a house with 3 bedrooms, fully functional, quite a nice quality house for that level of money. And the difference that that makes to a person's life, having brought up their family in these tiny corrugated wooden and iron shacks that are unbelievably cold and wet and damp in the wintertime, unbelievably hot and stifling in the summertime. And now you have a proper home, you know, that keeps you and your family warm and dry throughout the year. We put solar panels on the roofs of all of our houses, and it's an initiative that we took from since July of last year. We think it's unbelievably important that we play our part in conserving nature's resources, and this is one of our steps towards it. Anyone who lives here in Cape Town will be able to tell you that there has been huge power issues. Last year during winter time we had rolling blackouts all across the city. So it's up to each of us to make our best efforts in order to conserve what we have and in order for it to go further. So our contribution at the Naill Melon Townships Initiative is really to try and introduce these environmental issues and to make our communities sustainable and to build capacity in terms of environmental friendly issues. So we put the solar panels on the roof, we put energy efficient light bulbs in all of the rooms, we put low flow shower heads in our toilets, and we put dual flushing toilets. They're small measures, but every little helps. And if you think that we're going to build 5,000 houses across South Africa this year, when you add up all of those little bits, I think you'll come to quite a substantial whole.
Because beneficiaries receive the homes as outright grants, there is a need to reduce out-of-pocket expenditures by the Trust. One way the Trust reduces its expenses is by drawing on the help of volunteers.
Because at the end of the day, like any charity, fundraising is a terribly important part of it. We can't build these houses unless we get the funds to do so. So both our overseas volunteers and our volunteers here in South Africa raise money or donate money for the privilege of coming to work with us for the day.
Vernon Sortes here is one of the many volunteers who help on these projects. We should note something. This is a special case of volunteering.
We are a company that manufactures concrete roof tiles. We're a national company in South Africa, and we've been nominated as one of the suppliers of roof tiles on this contract, and we believe that our commitment to the community is to come back and put some effort into it, and that's, yes, certainly to pay for it and come and do some work on the site and show them that we really are committed to their cause. This is our first day working here, and what we've had to do is something we've never done before, is dig trenches for foundations. Quite a hard job. I don't think we're accustomed to that type of work, but anyway, it's part of our commitment to this project.
Charles Tomlinson.
I think it's very important for us helping yes, as suppliers to also help in the community. And I think it's a very good cause what Melon Housing is doing, and it's our little part to help them achieving their cause.
What have you been doing today?
I've been digging and digging and digging.
Oh. She's a way to make a living, huh? Now, Marjorie.
Yes. Firstly, coming into this area of Cape Town for the first time opens up your eyes to a lot of new, let's say, perspectives. And volunteering is important because it doesn't help you only supply them with the goods, and you don't physically go put something in and go see where it goes every day and what's going on at bottom level, at the ground level. And I think that's really important for us as suppliers to see what goes into this, to really appreciate what Melon Housing is doing in South Africa.
I'm from France.
Today we painted the house.
I'm from Germany. I also painted the house.
I think it's very important to do volunteering. That's what I'm thinking, because it helps out here in the communities. Especially a community like this that's living in poverty and in need.
Beneficiaries like these ladies also contribute with labor. The projects here are more than mere home building efforts. They are community development projects to provide jobs for residents of the areas, giving them skills and financial stability. In fact, some 1,700 local township residents are paid workers on the housing projects. Community residents are also intimately involved in designing and planning the projects.
I would also like to congratulate Geraldine for also being one of the participants that will get the first homeowner, and I hope you enjoy your new house.
They are also responsible for deciding who qualifies to receive homes. And for those who qualify, final receipt of the keys to their new homes can bring immense joy.
The double of keys.
Oh, yeah.
It's very exciting for me to be in my new house with my family.
This is the African world. When we come back, a profile of a former Peace Corps volunteer who served in Africa. We should note that Africa was the very first place that the Peace Corps ever set foot. One of the many young Americans who took President Kennedy's challenge was Mr. Robert Taft. He served in Tanzania. And we're pleased to have the governor as our special guest today.
Thank you, Kwame. Nice
Welcome to the program. Governor Taft, you graduated Yale University in 1963. You come from a very prominent political family. Your great-grandfather was President of the United States and Chief Justice. Your father and grandfather, both senators. So you literally have the world for your taking, as they say. Yet you decide at 21 years to go to Africa, Tanzania. to help people literally improve their lives, as President Kennedy challenged young Americans to do. Tell us why.
Well, you know, that was a long time ago, but it was a very exciting time, 1963. We had a new president that talked about the torch being passed to a new generation. It was a time of great idealism. At the same time, a lot of countries, especially in Africa, were becoming newly independent. So I think that influenced me a lot, the energy and enthusiasm of the idea of the Peace Corps, an opportunity to live overseas, which I had always wanted to do. I'd done some traveling, hadn't lived in another country, and also to provide some service. I'd done some service in college, but really to try to make a difference in the world through service in the Peace Corps was something that just seemed like a great opportunity to have.
So you landed probably in Dar es Salaam, I suppose, the capital of Tanzania, in 1963.
63.
What was it like?
Well, you know, we first went down to the southern highlands, a town called Mbeya in southern Tanzania, a very beautiful part of the country. It was close to the Rift Valley. They wanted to make sure we were well trained to go out. We were the first teachers to go out into the schools in Tanzania. They gave us 2 additional months of training there at Mbeya at a teacher training college. So we got to really get to know the country, meet the Africans who welcomed us very warmly, who were very friendly there, and really hone our teaching skills before we went out to the schools. But that was a very enjoyable time with my fellow Peace Corps volunteers. We had a chance to travel in the southern part of Tanzania. And I do remember in particular, this was about the time, unfortunately, tragically, that President Kennedy was assassinated. We hadn't been in the country very long. And I remember how upset, obviously, all of the Peace Corps volunteers were about that, because he was one of the reasons that we had this opportunity. But secondly, the Africans themselves were just so sad and so distressed and upset by this tragedy that it really made me think about, you know, that, hey, it's a very small world, and about the hope that President Kennedy had engendered throughout the world.
I'm not surprised, you know, that you say Africans themselves were shocked by his death. I tell you something, if you go to many African villages, there are 2 pictures. If you would see 2 pictures of pictures of 2 Americans in a little hut in a rural village, it would be the picture of President Kennedy and probably the picture of Muhammad Ali.
That's very interesting.
Now tell us about any unique experiences you had in Tanzania. I mean, what was it like working, you know, with students who come from a different culture, you know, living in a different setting? I mean, what were the unique experiences that you had in Tanzania?
Well, first of all, it was a great opportunity for me right out of college to have a lot of responsibility. We had 6 teachers, 2 Peace Corps, who really ran a boarding school, 7th and 8th grade. So it was our total life there. We lived with the students, we ate with the students, we were supervising the students constantly. I became, you know, very close with many of the students. They were learning English, so some of them could speak English quite well. But a lot of them, most of them, in fact, you know, didn't have shoes, didn't have a lot of wealth at all. They came from, it was cotton country. They came from small groups of huts out there in the country to live at the school. So I think it made me appreciate all that we have in my own country, but also how eager many of these Tanzanian students were to get a good education and to go on. And unfortunately, at that time, only 1 out of 5 of these students in 8th grade could go on to high school because there just weren't places for them. There was a big examination. It was very competitive. The students were really, I think, focused very hard on trying to learn enough English, learn enough math, geography, both of which I taught, to go on and to advance and to make their own way in the world.
And so let's pivot, you know, to your return to the United States. You come back in 1965. You graduate at law school in 1976. You know, enter politics. Then, you know, after that, state representative, county commissioner, secretary of state, and now governor. Oh, I'd like you, if you can, to put your finger on anything that you would say, I can attribute this to the 2 years I spent serving as a Peace Corps volunteer.
Well, first of all, I learned that I really love to teach. So I have had a lifelong interest in education. I love to go into the schools as governor, and I do so very often. And really, I've focused as governor on trying to improve the quality of education for all the students in the state of Ohio through high standards and teacher training and other initiatives that we have had to build schools and so forth. But the Peace Corps really gave me a lifelong interest in education and the role that education can play in creating opportunity for people. We still have challenges here in Ohio. We have a big gap in terms of poor students and students who are from more fortunate backgrounds, just as so many students were struggling over there in Tanzania. But also it has given me much more of an international perspective. Ohio is a state that's very involved in the world, Africa and all parts of the world, in terms of our business activities and companies who come here from other parts of the world to invest. So it really made me keenly interested in the international arena and also in education, both of which came from my early experience as a Peace Corps volunteer.
You call it Ohio Core, right? Your education, at least.
Our latest initiative is to build on our early focus on reading and elementary grade success to now encourage a more rigorous core curriculum in high school, math and science. That's what I talked about this year in my State of the State speech. We're trying to get that done before the end of the year, but it's an example of how we have continued to focus on improving our schools, and that interest, that passion of mine really, which is one reason that I wanted to be governor in the first place, really stems from my early days as a school teacher back in Misungwi, Tanzania.
Okay. Now, let's broaden briefly our discussion and talk largely about U.S.-African relations. A recent studies show that Africa is going to account for about 25% of U.S. oil import. 1 out of every 4 barrels of oil coming into the U.S. will come from Africa. It will equal or surpass the Middle East as a principal source of U.S. energy supply. Other natural resources are also, essential to U.S. Economic growth and development. Strong competition from the Chinese. Whatever experience you've got in Africa and from your position as a governor and as a veteran politician, what would you say at the top national level should be the focus now on policy between U.S. and Africa? What should the U.S. be looking at to engage African countries, and get the economy together, political reform? I mean, if there was a central message from the U.S. to African leaders, what will it be in your view?
Sure. Well, Ohio is a major manufacturing state. We're very involved in the international world marketplace. We export a lot of product. We're a leading export state. We have a lot of foreign companies operating in the state of Ohio. So from the standpoint of Ohio's success, the example I would draw is that we need to do all we can to integrate the countries in Africa into the world economy, to bring down the trade barriers so that countries in Africa can compete fairly with their crops, their products, whatever they make or do in Europe or in the United States. That's the best thing I think we can do to really help and enable Africans to help themselves. Certain kinds of capital they obviously need for certain kinds of projects. We can help on those through foreign assistance. But I think if we can just bring down the trade barriers and create more opportunities for Africans to engage in the world marketplace long term, that's the best thing that we can do for these countries.
There was something called the Multi-Fiber Agreement, which was meant to lower tariffs on apparels and textiles. It got expired, and because of its expiration, tariffs have increased, making it all the more difficult for African countries to import.
We need to work with the countries in Europe, too, to bring down those barriers and create more export opportunities for the countries over in Africa.
Let's come back to the Peace Corps. You served 41 years ago or so, roughly, give or take. If you were speaking to young Americans today, what would you tell them about service, outside the country, in the Peace Corps, if you may? What would be your message to young Americans as they look to contribute somehow, to society in general?
Well, President Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I put it in a broader context, really. What can you do to serve other people? Because, first of all, there are huge disparities between the rich and the poor areas in the world. And I think there's a responsibility on our part to reach out and do all we can to provide that helping hand or to help people in Africa, other parts of the world, to help themselves. And there are incredible opportunities for service. The people that I have met in Africa are very welcoming, they are very talented, they are eager to learn, they are eager to take advantage of opportunities, and they welcome assistance. Even today, the Peace Corps is serving in many countries in Africa. So there are great opportunities to learn another culture, to learn from other peoples, and also to serve and to share our expertise or our talent or our knowledge or our resources to help countries in Africa to develop a path where they too can provide greater opportunities for all their people, such as those that we enjoy here, are fortunate to enjoy in our country.
Let's wrap up by asking you, what next? Your term as governor ends soon because of term limit, you can't run again. What next? You join the Peace Corps or rejoin the Peace Corps?
You never know. Maybe I'll go back to Africa. I've thought about that. In fact, we have a daughter who's 27 years old who's interested in spending some time out in Mali right now and learning more about that particular culture and that country. But I'm interested in education. Again, it goes back to being a teacher in the Peace Corps and really understanding the power of education to transform lives. So I'm interested in doing all I can to improve education in Ohio, in the United States, and in the world, so that not just the best and brightest can succeed, but so that we can help all children learn what they can learn to succeed in this higher skills world economy, have a good opportunity to support their family.
Robert Taft, former Peace Corps volunteer who served in Tanzania 1963 to 1965, our guest on the program today. It was our pleasure to have you, Mr. Governor. We look forward to having you sometime in the future.
Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to a Peace Corps reunion later this year.
Well, let us know. We'll see if we can do some coverage of that as well.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks so much. My pleasure.
I'm Kwame Clement for the African World. Thanks for viewing. I'll see you next week on another edition of the program. So long, everybody.
I've got keys for my house, free at last. I'm happy.